Welcome to Bourbon Sauce. Today's episode is called Top vs. Bottom Shelf. We will discuss getting what you pay for in various aspects of life. And today we've got Ryan and myself, Dan. Grab your favorite bourbon and join us for the show. Before we get into it, Ryan, why don't you tell us what you're sipping on?
I want to hear what you're sipping on first.
So we kind of did a little reversey roll on this one. I'm drinking something that is 103 proof and tastes like sweat that came off my ball sack. It's called Fighting Cock, and it is a Kentucky straight bourbon, and it's from Bardstown, where a lot of good bourbons come from, but this one in particular is not one of them.
Well, I mean, considering it's like $14 a bottle.
Yeah. It's like that tin fucking shit that I use now for putting in marinades for like barbecue sauce.
Was it Silhouette?
I don't remember what it is. It's something terrible also, but it's in a metal can. It looks like a fucking
Oil can?
I feel like this would be great to use as a fire starter. Not for drinking. Why don't you tell everybody what you're drinking?
So since we did this old switcheroo, I decided to splurge a little bit, and I'm drinking E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof.
Yeah, that one's a good one.
It's definitely good bourbon. High end.
Yeah, I'm regretting my choices because this is, I'd almost rather drink my own urine than this. Almost. I say almost. So, we've had experiences with good and bad when it comes to various things in life. When you get what you pay for on a lot of different things. More recently, we were involving ourselves in some, we're trying to do marketing stuff, and we did some outsourcing because that's what you do when you're trying to grow a channel or trying to grow business in general, is you do a little bit of outsourcing for certain things. And we thought we were going to do well, or at least I did in particular, outsourcing to a individual to get us some product. But as the saying goes, you can either do it good, fast, or cheap. You can't get all three.
You can get two, but you can't get all three.
Right. And so the price was good. The timing was not. The product was mediocre. And then you happen to stumble across a company that's there in Dixon, the Main Street Emporium, I think is what they're called.
In Dixon.
And they have pretty much been on point with promise and delivery of product. Whereas, the other one was over promise, under deliver.
Should be rolling out our bourbon glass sets this week.
Yep.
And our slate coasters this week.
Yeah, for those of you that are interested, you can email us at thebourbonsauced@gmail.com and put in your order requests. We will tally that up and get some pertinent information from you folks and then get it sent out to you. I know we already have some demand for the hats, which is great. We're going to have some shirts. We're going to have the coasters. We're going to have the cups. And then probably some other merch coming, whether it's keychain stickers or whatever. We'll probably toss in a sticker in the box when we send you some merch, because we do have stickers that we already have in our hands, which, I think they look all right for what they were. But we also paid to have certain things where we thought we were going to get some recommendations on how to better serve our consumers with our branding, but that never happened. So that's kind of disappointing too, because we were told that if you do this, and this, you pay me this, I will deliver this, and this.
Right.
And it was in a contract, but the problem is none of it really came to fruition. And I think it was that individual got overwhelmed by what was going on in their life versus what they could actually deliver to us, which sucks for them. But you can't promise something and then not deliver it. So
You're,
I think
so I was raised with this philosophy. You're only as good as your word, and if your word's no
if
good,
your wood's
then
no good, then you got
if your wood's no good, then
got
yeah,
no
then
fire.
You got no fire, right? Yeah, but you're only as good as your word, and if your word's no good, then you got nothing.
right. And I agree with that. If you look at things, even I've hired other people to do stuff around, whether it was electrical work or plumbing work or whatever around the property. I've definitely noticed that if you want it done well, you have to pay well in order to
Yes.
have that accomplished. You can't expect to hire Joe Fabeats from down the street to give you something that a corporation would be able to deliver, because they're held to a different standard because their name is out there with that corporation. Whereas the guy that is just trying to make a buck, he may not offer you the best product end result, right? And that's not true all the time, because there are instances where you'll have somebody that you pay, like for you, right? You do some home remodeling stuff on the side, and you get paid to do those things, but I feel like you're being underpaid for your services because you deliver a quality product, but you're not demanding quality pay. You could, and
Yeah.
I think you should, but you're doing your buddy a favor by keeping your costs down to give him a leg up on whatever whatever
Well,
it is you're doing.
so it kind of works out. So I'm a good example, right? So I don't charge an absorbent amount, but I also 90% of the time I don't have to factor cost of materials. I don't have to factor any of that stuff. 90% of the time, the material's already there. I just walk in,
so you're just charging labor at that point.
Do my business and roll out.
That's different, yeah. If you had to provide the materials and everything, then it would be an up cost.
Right. Now, I have done a couple of jobs for him where I went ahead and got the materials and stuff, and then I got reimbursed.
Right.
Right? So that
makes sense.
Right, and then that was worked. But typically with me, for most of the jobs, it's, hey, you go ahead and have the materials. Doesn't matter if I have to go pick them up.
Yeah.
But you go ahead and get the materials, and I'll just charge you labor.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I did a similar thing when I was living in North Carolina. A girl I was dating, she was renting for her horse. She was at a barn, and the gentleman that was providing the barn and everything else, he was an elderly guy, and I told him I would build a couple run-in shelters for him. All I expected was him to pay for the materials, and I would do the labor for free, because it wasn't necessarily for free. It was more or less so she would have time at those stables for free.
Right.
And so I built them, and he was just like kind of shocked, and was like, "Damn, these are actually pretty good." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not, not a contractor or anything, but I know how to build a goddamn structure. It's not that hard. As long as everything is level and measured the way you're supposed to, it'll turn out the way it's you envision." But I feel like a lot of times when you pay somebody, you have an expectation to have a quality product delivered to you, no matter what it is. Whether it's a mechanic, somebody that's doing your plumbing, somebody that's doing your electrical work, somebody that's doing maybe reconstruction, roofing, dog sitting, dog walking, any of that, yard maintenance. Like right now I'm paying a dude to do yard maintenance, and it's basically the bare minimum that he does, and it's like $90 every 2 weeks. And I'm just kind of like, my time is worth more than $90 to me, so to have him do that for me, it's great. I just had a guy come out yesterday and look at some work I want him to complete for me here at the property, because I just don't have time and I don't feel like dealing with it. So he's going to give me a quote in probably a week. And he said he's 3 weeks out. So he'd at least let me know, hey, I'm 3 weeks out on jobs. So he kind of wanted to know when my timeline was, which is something that most people should do when you go into an agreement with somebody, is figure out what their expectations are.
Right.
And if you can't meet those expectations, then that's when you say, hey, I appreciate that you took me into consideration, but I'm going to have to back out of this.
Right.
And I feel like that's something that more small business owners need to understand and learn, is that you want to expand, but you don't want to overextend yourself. And in order to expand, at some point you will have to bring on help.
Yes.
Which costs money. So then you have to upcharge your customers at that point, which kind of sucks. But if you look at these big corporations and they're charging you $130 an hour for work, there's a reason for that. It's because they're going to promise they're insured, they're licensed, versus somebody down the street that you're just like, hey, can you come? Like, we had a guy down the road who was wanting to get you to cut down some trees.
Yep.
But he wanted you to be licensed and insured. And it's like, dude, we were just trying to do this as like a favor, as a neighbor. You know what I mean? Like, you're getting what you pay for. Like, if you want somebody that's licensed and insured, then whatever you were going to charge him, expect at least double.
Right.
When you get quoted by a big company like Davy Trees or whoever these people are around in this area,
you're on average you're looking around $800 per tree on average,
and that's just to have it felled.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to limit, and then they rent whatever vehicle or machinery that they've got.
Right.
So, and then to haul it off, because a lot of times people want that shit hauled off.
Like, here's a good example of not providing on what you agree to. So, doing a big remodel, we're talking
all for your pappy,
for my grandpa and my grandma.
Oh yeah.
And you're talking a full house remodel all the way from the studs up.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So electrical, plumbing, the whole nine, right? So sheetrockers are already there, running sheetrock. Well, my grandpa has gotten a plumber, a couple of plumbers come out and look. One priced it a certain amount, and he thought that was too high, so he didn't take that one. The next guy comes in, prices it for $8,000 or $9,000. He's like, okay, great. When can you start? The guy says next Monday. Okay, that's a week. Too easy. Next Monday rolls around. It's going to be a week from Wednesday. So you
Wow.
just tacked on 10 more days, right? So then the guy shows up.
So now everybody else is behind schedule.
Everybody's now starting to stall, and I'm having to dance them around the house doing other stuff. So then the plumber shows up finally, starts working at like 10 o'clock that day. By 2 o'clock, he busts a hole in the bathroom floor, intentionally, in my opinion, because where he busted the hole through,
there was no need for it.
There was no need, and there were 7 layers of flooring underneath it. We're talking a house that's 100 years old, so they've just built flooring on top of flooring. Okay, so he busts a hole through it. So now I have to have the framers go in, cut it out, reframe it, all that stuff. Well, rather than say, hey, we're just going to pop off for the day, we'll be back tomorrow, they just exit, get in their vehicles, and leave. They don't show back up the next day. They won't return my grandfather's calls. The next day after that, he finally gets a hold of me. He says, yeah, I just can't do it. So wasn't going to call him back at all. Was just
so he makes everybody go through that whole bullshit just to at the end of it say, yeah, I just can't do it.
Right. So then,
instead of just from the get go being like, you know what, it's more than I can handle.
Yeah,
you might want to find somebody else.
So then find somebody else, right? But this other plumber is like, well, I know you need it time now, and I have 4 jobs ahead of me or ahead of you, so to bump you ahead of the line, it's going to cost more, which is understandable.
That does make sense.
Right, that does make sense.
If you want to be, expedited to the front of the line, it's going to cost.
He gets expedited.
Because he's missing out on some other jobs that he's going to get paid on.
So he gets expedited to the front of the line, all right?
Yep.
So we're talking all new plumbing in the house. All new plumbing. Under the floor, everything, right? 3 sinks, 3 showers, 3 toilets. How long do you think that should take? All new plumbing under the floor, 3 sinks, 3 toilets, 3 showers. Plus vents.
maybe 3. If you're working, how many guys are working? First of all,
2 guys to rough it in.
2 guys. I'd say 2.5 days. Maybe
You would be correct. They were done in 2.5 days.
Yeah. So I mean that
Walked
seems
out
standard.
Walked out with $13K.
Damn. For 2.5 days of work, that's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'd do that. Shit.
Yeah.
Maybe we should get into flipping houses.
I know plenty of contract crews at this point,
Right.
but I will say the quality of work was really good. Their craftsmanship was good. They worked efficient. They worked quick, right?
Yep.
But then I can also say that the guy doing doing the concrete is one of the best concrete workers I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And hands down, people literally now drive by the property while we're still doing the remodel to stop and admire this guy's work.
Yeah.
And then start questioning, hey, is he available? All this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't speak a lick of English, but my Spanish is getting much better.
Yeah. There's a concrete guy that I know. He does really, really good concrete, but he's up in Ohio, so it doesn't really help us down here.
Right.
Tim, if you're listening to the show, which you might be, this is your shout out. He's done an amazing amount of concrete work back where my parents' house was in Ohio.
Yeah.
He did like the entire development, everybody's driveways, their front steps. Like he did a shit ton of concrete work for that neighborhood, and he's done several other neighborhoods. But I think he was prior Army. I don't remember what he did in the Army. I think he was an infantry guy, but then he somehow segued into doing concrete work when he got out, and he absolutely loved doing that because, you know, you get into a project and you see the end result after all that labor, and he takes pride, and he was meticulous, and he had attention to detail, so it was very well done with whatever he did. And if you wanted stamped or you wanted stained or you wanted, you know, like I think I hired him to do epoxy work in my garage, and that turned out amazing. It only took him like a day to get all that taken care of because, you know, you got to like acid etch kind of the concrete and prep it in order to get all it ready for that material to be put on top of it. But it was worth what I was paying, you know. And I think that's something that people need to understand is if you are going to have work done, make sure that they're licensed and insured almost always, unless it's something you don't really care about, like grading work or, you know, maybe even if a tree's in the middle of a field or something, you don't give a shit because it's not going to hit anything.
Yeah, it all depends on
building a fence. Nobody
depends
gives
on what
a
you're
shit.
doing, right? Like if you've got to do electrical work to code,
absolutely,
then make sure they're licensed and insured.
You don't want a
right?
house fire. You know what I mean? The
Well,
next thing you know, somebody's wiring up a breaker, and it's a way smaller breaker than it's supposed to be. Like, it's, you know, no big deal. It'll work until you plug in a hairdryer.
There's a lot of different things.
But when it comes to vehicles, even, this is something that we've more recently discussed, is getting what you pay for.
Oh, mechanics are a big get what you pay for.
Absolutely. The guy that's near our house here, Clark's.
Absolutely love taking my vehicle down there.
That guy is one of those good old boys that you definitely would like to have as like a close friend, because I bet you if like you were buddy with that guy, he'd probably do some of the work on the side just for fucking funsies.
Right.
Or for free, or at least show you how to do it yourself so you can do it yourself going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But he does do really good work, and I need to talk to him about getting my Jeep in there because I think I don't have the tools that I need in order to pull off that drive shaft to separate it and recompress it back together without going and buying some aftermarket drive shaft, because I just don't feel like dealing with it. I looked at it and I was like, I just don't think if I separate this, I think I might break it. So, that's one of those things where knowing a good mechanic is imperative when you own older vehicles.
Yes. or being able to do it yourself.
Yeah, not so much with the newer vehicles, because most of the time you could just drop them off at any dealership and they're like no big deal. But the older vehicles, a lot of times, dealerships can't handle them. They're not equipped. They don't have the parts anymore. They have to outsource it. Same with like your old GMC that's been sitting at the dealership for what
7 months.
7 months now.
Yeah,
because they couldn't get the right tool.
Yeah, that they've been waiting on from corporate rather than just buy their own. They've been waiting for corporate to send them one.
Which I don't understand. If you know the demographic of this area and it's a military town, 9 times out of 10 you're going to need that tool for other Acadias or whatever else it might service.
It services most vehicles.
So it's like
it's a 2-way channel instead of a 1-way channel.
So why the fuck would they not buy it? It's weird to me. And how much does this tool cost?
I don't know.
I'd love to know that.
But let's put it this way. They're willing to send my vehicle to any mechanic in town and pay for the transport, give me the ECM, they put a brand new battery in it and let it roll away just so they don't, just because at this point.
Because they don't want to deal with it at this point. Because they know it's probably more of an undertaking than they were willing to deal with. Which is a frustration on your part because now you have to figure out how the hell to get your vehicle back. That was perfectly running before that.
Or I can sit and wait.
Or you can sit and wait.
For them to finally get that tool.
Yeah. Which then, by the time they fix that, God knows what else is going to happen to the engine and everything else since it's been sitting for so long. It sounds like you're Harley all over again.
Right? Which is why I'm not a fan of dealerships around a military town.
Well, they're called dealerships for a reason.
I would rather drive an hour, 2 hours away to deal with somebody on a vehicle or anything.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely something to be said about military towns and people taking advantage of the military.
Especially when you get all those new soldiers fresh out of basic and AIT that have no vehicle. They know you're out looking for a vehicle.
It's sad that corporations exist that thrive on feeding and predatory type behavior on young, naive soldiers or even young, naive people in general. Anyway, having a good mechanic is a good idea. When it comes to houses, owning a house, it's good to have a good what are they called?
General contractor?
Well, yeah, but they're handyman. Good handyman. Having a good handyman is a good idea. But again, you got to be able to trust that person to do quality work.
I'm a handy man.
You're giving handies to men? That's weird.
Oh, I said I'm a handy man.
Oh, like you're hands-on with the women?
Yeah, I'm handsy.
Yeah. Speaking of top versus bottom. Anyway, when you think about other things, liquor, for example, right? Like
we just had a good example of top shelf versus bottom shelf.
Exactly. And that is something that people just don't grasp, I think, if you're not a connoisseur of beverages that are all over the place.
There's a big difference in drinking it because you enjoy the taste and drinking it
to get hammered. Right. So like this fighting cock, I would use it as a mixer.
Yes.
You know, like if I'm doing Jack and Coke or traditionally a Jack and Coke or a whiskey and Coke or a bourbon and Coke.
Right.
This would be a mixer. Or even in old fashioned or
I don't even know if I would put that in an old
Manhattan or anything that was like
that's definitely a well bourbon.
Oh, it's well below well. This is like a country bumpkin bar well versus like Nashville well, because a lot of Nashville wells they still have really high end bourbons.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting to me, but. And people will bitch about that too when you're down in Nashville and they're like, oh my God, it's $13 for a beer. It's like,
well, first off, why did you go to Nashville and why did you go right down the tourist track?
Right. And also, you got to realize you're paying for the experience. And so your drinks are going to cost more in order to cover all that overhead that they are burdened with at that company.
Right. For example, if you go to mom and pop bar in a small town, right, and they have live music, what do you normally have at the door? a cover charge.
Yeah, exactly.
To cover the cost of the band. Whereas you go to Nashville, no matter where you go, it's live music everywhere pretty much. Okay, and you go from paying, $6 for a beer at mom and pop bar down, in bumfuck nowhere
Yep.
to you're paying $13 for a beer in Nashville. Well, you didn't have to pay your $20 cover charge at the door.
True.
And you have 9 out of 10 times you have a much higher quality performer on stage than you have at that mom and pop place.
And
that
that's
little
true.
Hole in the wall.
And that's especially when you think about Nashville, that we have at our disposal, and most people don't, many upcoming artists that are being put on display. And so you're going to pay for that. Like, say you're at Old Reds, for example.
Yeah.
You're going to see a bunch of upcoming artists because Blake Shelton owns that place, and he's able to reach out and get some of the best. Same with
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock's bar.
Kid Rock, you got the chance of seeing Kid Rock.
And there's that, because Kid Rock frequents his own bar, which is great. But then you have Miranda Lambert's down the street, and you've got Garth Brooks' bar, which is opening soon.
You've got
which that'll be cool. I can't wait for that one to open up, because I want to see what that one's going to be like and what their clientele. It's probably going to be the same touristy bullshit, but I also want to see what it's like on like a fucking Wednesday.
What is it, Luke Bryant? No. What's his name? The one Knockin' Boots. Knockin' Boots. He's got a bar down there too. He's on American Idol.
I'm drawing a blank.
I am too.
I know
you're
talking about.
The only song I listen to of his is Knockin' Boots.
I
don't listen to any of his other music.
Either way.
He's too popsy for me.
But when we think about getting, what you paid for, right? And I touched on this earlier, and it's like a circle of death, if you will. You've got good, fast, and cheap.
Yes.
So you can get two of those, but you can't get fast and cheap on a timely matter.
Oh no, you can get fast and cheap,
but it's gonna be.
But you're not gonna get
good.
You're not gonna get good,
yeah,
right?
Quality's gonna be shit.
You can get good and fast, but it's gonna cost you, and you can get good and cheap, but it's gonna take a lot longer.
Right.
So, and people like this is one thing I love, especially dealing with contractors and stuff. A lot of them will be like, "That's not a thing. You can't get quality and fast."
That's not true.
I'm like,
that's
no,
not true.
I'm like,
because there's a lot of tattooed artists.
I'm like, you're full of shit. Literally, I told one of the plumbers, I'm like, you're full of shit if you think you can't get quality and speed. This doesn't mean, when I say quality and speed, it doesn't mean that I need this done like in 2 hours when it's a 2-day job.
Right.
Right? Or it's a week-long job. But if you're efficient, you have your materials, and barring no issues, you should be able to complete this in, let's say, 3 days efficiently and quickly.
Yep.
Okay, then price accordingly and finish it in that time.
So, I have a cousin who does tattoos in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And he's done a few of mine. And he does really, really quality work. And you're going to pay for it. But he is not fast at all.
Right.
He is very meticulous and very slow. And it took me weeks, and I mean weeks, to get my half sleeve done that I've got. And people are like, God, that's really good work. And I'm like, yeah, but it took forever.
Right.
And I know some artists that I've been to in Vegas that'll do a similar amount of work in less time, but you're paying way more than my cousin's charging. Because my cousin, I think, was charging like $130 an hour or something.
Well, and location kind of plays into that too.
A little bit.
Because, you know,
because the cost of renting that shop or whatever.
Right.
Yes, I get that. However, for where he was downtown Fayetteville, the price of where he was at was expensive. So for $130 an hour, he was still pretty moderately priced for what the quality of artistic work that he was doing. I just feel like when you go to a bigger shop like Rigert's or our Regrets or whatever the fuck whatever their name is.
No regrets.
Yeah. Or in Fayetteville, there was a couple different places that were like bigger shops that had multiple locations. Sure, you can get it done faster, but it's not always going to be quality. You're going to sacrifice. If you want it fast, you don't normally sacrificing quality or price.
Well,
because you're either paying more to make it fast or you're going to take a hit on the quality to be fast. Because I've had interns that did really fast work for low price, but it turned out looks like shit, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, now I have to pay somebody more to cover up this at some point, or pay to have laser done to get rid of it.
Well, it's like so my shoulder tattoos were my first 2 tattoos ever, right?
That's funny, mine too.
And I went to the same guy for both, a local guy back in my hometown, right?
Yeah, same.
Cost me next to nothing, but you're talking 2007, right? So things weren't that expensive then. But
my
even
first
then,
tattoo was 1998.
Even then, yeah, but you're old.
I am.
Even then, right? Quality wise,
they did all right.
I mean, for me at the time, I was like, yeah, this looks great, right?
And that's the thing, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Let's fast forward to me being in Hawaii, right? Hooking up with a local Hawaiian tattoo artist.
Yeah.
And doing my back piece, that Viking skull I have, right? 19 hours. 19 hours is what that took.
That's a lot.
Okay.
Obviously not in one sitting, but
we did 11 hours, and then he said, I've got to quit because my hand can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And then we went back and did another 8.
Which is the great thing, I think,
later.
about these rotary machines versus the old school ones.
Yeah.
The tattoo artist can go a lot longer.
Right. But let's say, so shoulder tattoos, $150, right?
Yeah.
Back tattoo, which only takes up a quarter of my upper left back.
Yep.
$1,200. My most expensive tattoo. Okay. $1,200, 19 hours. And it has so much detail. Like, it is, when people see a picture or see it with my shirt off, that's like my number one most complimented tattoo next to my half sleeve on my arm, right?
Right. Which is like a tribute.
Which is a tribute piece, right? And that's another interesting piece. 4 hours, $400.
That's pretty good.
I got on an airplane an hour after it was done.
Ooh.
And left Hawaii.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That was it. That's how quick this guy got me in, did this piece, and I was on an airplane an hour later.
You know, sex workers.
You
get what you pay for there too. Because if you want to pay $20 for a blowjob, that girl's probably going to be 300 pounds, missing some teeth, or maybe 100 pounds, missing some teeth, strung out on meth, versus, $1,000 for an hour of pleasure. And she is looking like Megan Fox, and, her clientele base is a lot smaller, so it's an exclusivity thing.
You know what I find interesting? And we're going to get so much shit for this.
I can't
really
wait.
Don't care.
That's why I brought it up.
I find this hilarious, right?
That's why I brought it up.
So
I'm trying to open a door for confrontation.
So you take, what is it, Amsterdam and Germany?
Oh, I love Amsterdam.
Right? You go.
I love Germany.
And they have buildings where you just climb the stairway to heaven, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Well, technically, it's kind of
You can
reversed.
go to Vegas and do the same thing at the Bunny Ranch.
Right. Well, you in Vegas, we'll talk Vegas in a minute too.
Yeah.
But since we're on the topic, right? I guess it's not Stairway to Heaven because it would be reversed, right? Because the higher you climb, the cheaper they are, because they're out of the way.
Well,
whereas your bottom window watchers, right? That's your big money right there.
It depends. In Amsterdam, there's nowhere to climb. It's all flat in the red light district. And this was when I went there. It was 2004, 2005. No, 2002, 2001. When I was stationed in England, we took a trip to Amsterdam over Thanksgiving weekend, and I gave thanks to many a women. And it's funny. It's funny because you go down one, like it's segmented kind of, right? I don't know if you've ever been in Amsterdam, but it is segmented. You have like the
I've never been.
Asians,
I
you
wanna go.
have the blondes, you have the brunettes, you have the trannies, you have the big girls. Like it's a flavor for everybody in that region.
So it's like Gangs of New York with Leonardo DiCaprio. They're just
they're
you
very
got one
much
square, and then they're
they're
segregated.
very
around
much
the square.
segregated
Yeah.
in that little region, and it's kind of interesting because me and my buddies, there was 4 of us that we went there, and we're walking down the street, and you see this lady, which we thought was a lady, showing us her tits, and they were great tits, right? And then all of a sudden, you see this giant dong. She whips out this. I mean, she had a fucking cock that would have made a horse blush. It was fucking huge, man. And I was just like, I was in awe. I was just like, wow, good for you, man. Like, congratulations for having a huge cock. You know what I mean? But that's the thing when you're walking around Amsterdam, because they're trying to entice you to like come into them and not literally.
Yeah.
Figuratively and literally. But you're walking around and you're just like, oh, all right. And they'll show you. And some of them, they have like 2 girl specials in a room or whatever. And you're like, oh, well, how much for that? And they're like, oh, back then it was like €100 or whatever. And you're like,
right.
€100? Fuck yeah. I'll do 2 chicks at once for €100. Why not? I'll never have a chance to do that again. But it was interesting seeing what you pay for versus what you get, because of the fatter, like you've got farther to the red light district, it was cheaper, because obviously the front of a section where you come from, like the train station and you start walking into it, that's the most fresh, that's the most prominent. Now, and they put like the top earners, I guess, towards the front, and then the shitty ones are towards the back of neighborhood, if you want to call it a neighborhood.
And this is kind of interesting, right? So in the Old West, if you actually do research, and I've watched Westerns and the documentaries, right? Because that's my bread and butter is Westerns, right? They would have their top tier girls in the saloon, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. They got to be down there by the piano and talking to all the guys.
Somewhere else, they had what most would consider what they would call like tent city, right? And that's where
you can pitch a tent, but you can't get nothing here.
That's where the old ones would go. They would put out the pasture, kind of, right?
Oh, the gummers.
Not even that far. We're not even that far.
Oh, okay.
And then from there, you would have some where they would get kind of pushed even further out of town onto like hog farms or other places, right? And it's just a lonely old man who slaughters pigs, and they're paying him to let these women stay at this house. And like if you couldn't afford the girls at the saloon or the girls in the tents, you could go down to the hog farm and you get a poke for
so you're really getting in
next to the cost of a slice of bacon, more or less, right? So then it's like, okay, little Timmy's down there he's supposed to be getting bacon for mom, and
he's bringing the bacon home.
The brothers, right? Then it's like, okay, little Timmy, are you buying that slab of bacon, or are you getting a poke and half of the bacon?
He's porking for sure. Right? Either way.
Right. But it's interesting looking back on that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then think about it today, right? We're one of the few places where they frown upon that, and it's
because of
it's illegal,
human
right?
trafficking is a big problem,
now,
right?
I do not agree with human trafficking at all, right?
No,
that's a no.
That's a thing that happens when it comes to cartels or anyone else. You know what I mean?
But there are legit women out there who really that's what they want to do. Right? There are women out there
that plenty
want to do that.
There's plenty of them that are offering it up, because you can go on to plenty of websites out there.
OnlyFans, you've got it all over the place.
The OnlyFans is the biggest thing that I understood. So being on dating sites,
well, it's like tobacco, right? If you're gonna, if I look at it this way, the government doesn't want it. One, human trafficking.
They're gonna figure out how to regulate it.
If you can regulate it,
yeah,
then why not just tax it and let it happen, right? It's happening anyways.
Well,
now, if you can avoid the human trafficking aspect and stop that,
I think that's the biggest problem that the government's running into, is because there's that moral dilemma, and
I mean, you had it for hundreds of years.
I know, but
up until now. I
Even,
don't agree with the human trafficking.
even back to
aspect at
kings
all.
and queens, they used to
Right.
fucking.
Right.
This is way off topic, but I think if the government wanted to step in and create bordellos, they could, and then have it so those people are tested on a regular and tax them at an exorbitant sin tax like they do for tobacco and alcohol.
What do you want to bet marriage rate plummets?
Marriage rates are already plummeting.
No. Like flatline.
No,
plummet.
I think divorce rates would go up, not marriage rates.
Divorce rates would go up. Marriage rates would flatline.
I think marriage
because
rates
men
are,
would just be like, wait a minute. I don't have to put up with attitude or anything else, and I'm just waiting for you, Karen, to comment with any other bullshit. And I go get a poke for $150.
I mean, you take a girl out for a dinner, and that's $100 for that dinner. So it's equivalent to the same thing you're going to pay for to get what you want anyway. So
I mean, don't
why
get me
would
wrong.
a guy not want to pay for prostitutes?
Right.
That's why you look at all these politicians and everybody else that's in the higher seats in America. They're doing that. It's just not publicized. People don't realize that that's going on.
Politicians get busted for it all the time.
Bill Clinton
Sending
got a
dick
blowjob
pics.
underneath his fucking desk.
Podium, right? So, and then sending dick pics to your
Yeah,
what do they call 'em?
whiner.
Interns, and
Also
all that
known
shit,
as
right?
wiener.
Yeah, right. I mean, come on now, they do it. Everybody
That's the
knows.
perfect politician name to have is a whiner, but it looks like wiener.
Yep.
I'm absolutely sending dick pics if I'm that guy.
But it's
You want to see
hilarious.
my wiener?
Want to see my Packer? But it's interesting, right? I know we've segued off here, and we'll segue back.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's like I want a genuine relationship at some point,
Oh, me too.
Right,
I want it
but-
to be wholesome as fuck,
right? But it's
but also dirty as fuck.
That's right there, right? That is where if you can't be yourself and she can't be herself, and you all just can't communicate, be 100% open with each other.
What are you doing?
Exactly. Which is why most of these
Yeah.
relationships nowadays fail
I feel
because
like-
everybody sugarcoats shit.
Well, yeah, I feel like that's the
Just
reason
be
why
who
a
you
lot of my
are.
relationships have failed in the past, besides other things, is that one person's trying to pretend to be something to entice the other person to stick around. And then all of a sudden, once they realize they're living a lie, they become disinterested.
Right.
So,
Or that person, once they find out they've got you hooked, then they let them true colors fly.
and then you're like, what the fuck? I didn't sign up
Exactly.
for this.
Exactly.
I've had that happen
Right?
too, but we digress. That
Well,
was
I mean, technically, that's kind of top shelf versus bottom shelf, because if you got a man or a woman that is open, communicating,
top
being
shelf-
honest and transparent,
a top shelf relationship.
that would be a top shelf relationship right
versus a bottom shelf relationship. Bottom shelf relationship is definitely going to be a friends with benefits or below that.
there. No, that like for me,
No.
a bottom shelf relationship
One night
is
stand.
gaslighting, belittling.
Okay, so an
That's a
abusive relationship would be
bottom.
bottom shelf.
right? I don't consider a one night stand a relationship. I don't consider
Well,
friends
you
with
still have to
benefits a
establish some
relationship.
sort of relationship.
You have to have a connection of
It's
someone.
a facsimile of a relationship, right? Versus a legitimate, committed relationship where you're working to build something together, right? I feel like a top shelf relationship, both people are aligned in their thought process, aligned
Yep.
in their goals, aligned in their personalities and everything else that goes between. I feel like, personally, my opinion is a top relationship is harder to obtain in today's society, where it is bred to be a throwaway society. And what I mean by that is that at any given moment, you can swipe left or right and instantly have somebody else. So,
Yeah.
it's a lot different because your reach is farther than it used to be. Back in the day when I was coming up, you didn't have the access to everybody. It was literally you had to meet somebody face to face. You had to bump into them in public. all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, we have a lot in common. We should like hang out again. Versus now, everyone's got these apps and they're able to reach far and wide, whether it's from the United States to another continent even.
Right.
And they're like, oh, well, I am very infatuated with you. And that's like, that's great, you're infatuated. But when does that infatuation wear off? Well, it usually wears off as soon as the reality kicks in. And
Typically
they see
within
that you are not.
90 to 120 days.
Yeah, normally. That's typical because normally most people can put on an act for about 90 days. After 90 days, your true self usually comes out because we as people we are just made to be truthful. And people can try to trick that as much as they want to, but you get what you pay for in relationships. You get what you pay for when it comes to investing in a stock. It comes to a company, a product that you're buying.
Right.
I was always taught buy nice or buy twice.
That's fair. That's very fair.
So when it comes to anything, relationships or otherwise, sure, she might look or he might look like this perfect person in front of you, but what lies underneath that? So you got to dig a little deeper. And that same thing goes when you hire somebody to do work at your house. You got to dig a little deeper and go listen to reviews or read the reviews. Because, I mean, I bought plenty of products out there, and I read the reviews before I buy them. Just like a TV, a computer, fucking side-by-side, a Ski-Doo, a fucking vehicle, bourbon, anything, right? Clothes. I mean, you could pay a shit ton of money for like, what is that? Like high-end fucking clothing that people buy.
Abercrombie and Fitch?
No, that's not high-end clothing. It's like Gucci.
Gucci. Oh, Gucci and Versace.
Right. So you get Gucci or Versace, but you feel the material, it's really fucking thin. And like you wash it a couple times and it starts to fall apart because it's fucking terribly made.
Well, it's not supposed to be washed.
Whatever, man.
You're supposed to go pay somebody to do it for you.
If I'm paying $300 for a fucking shirt, it better last me a lifetime.
No, sir. It lasts you for one ball or one ceremony.
Yeah. And that's the problem with those companies is that they build it to break. So, unfortunately, when it comes to that,
I think
you
we
don't get
talked about that, how they did the light bulb thing where
we did talk about
Yeah.
that, but unfortunately, they don't build it to last. They build it so you have to replace it. So people need to be aware of what they buy and what they're getting, because you don't always if you pay more, it doesn't mean it's quality.
Correct.
It could be a branding thing that you're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing when it comes to like music concerts. You could go to like, I don't know, a Taylor Swift concert.
Ugh.
And you could, which she's a really good musician. And
If you like pop music.
but it is, she's a really good musician.
I agree she is
but
a
you
great
could go to like,
she is a great musician and a great performer.
some of these places here that you pay a cover charge to go listen to.
Yeah.
You're not getting the same performance out of them.
Well, no, because nobody can spend $3 million on a stage act, at a bar.
Exactly. But you get
I
what
can
you
go
pay
to
for.
a bar here and listen to some really great music for next to nothing.
That's true.
Right? And then that artist in 10 years could make it big, and then I want to go listen to him and I pay $300 or $400 a ticket, and it's like, you're the same artist you were then.
Was that TV show with Simon Cowell?
Americans Got Talent.
No, American Idol. That's what it is.
It used to be.
No, it is.
He's on America's Got Talent now.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is. He's not been on American Idol.
American Idol
for years.
is where I used to cringe listening to some of those singers.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd get so mad because some of those singers that would be like 3rd, 4th, or 5th place, you're like, what the fuck? They're really good.
It's because the people get a vote.
I know. And that's terrible.
And Simon Cowell hasn't been on American Idol in about a decade.
Is it?
Yeah, he's on America's Got Talent now because he started Britain's Got Talent, and then it spread across.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we've covered a broad swath of top versus bottom shelf on this episode.
I mean, there is absolutely so, but this is what is interesting with the top versus bottom shelf, right? Is don't be deceived by the top shelf versus bottom shelf as far as
no, because every once in a while you might be
Right?
shocked because
we find stuff on the bottom shelf
We
all
have.
the time because it's new, it's
Yep.
up and coming, and it turns out to be pretty amazing.
and then it
the
becomes
Wilderness
top shelf.
Trail,
That's mid shelf right now.
right?
Yeah.
The what is it? The Brothers Bond.
Yeah. Even Larceny back when it came out, it
Larceny.
wasn't very top shelf when it came out.
And then
the
newest
Bighorn.
one, the newest one would be the Bighorn Bourbon out of Willie's Distillery out of Enos, not Penis.
It sounds like
Dan
penis.
says.
It's penis.
Enos, Montana,
Yeah.
right? It's up and coming. It just hasn't.
I can't
spread
wait to
far
get Jackson
enough.
back on here to talk about penis, Montana. I'm
Another one, Smoke Wagon is another one coming up.
Yeah, and they actually are priced moderately. And being out of Vegas, that's a really good one. It's interesting. It's kind of like when people are talking about beer, and they're like, oh well, there's all these microbrews and everything else.
Right.
There's a lot of that going on when it comes to the bourbon world too. There's a lot of micro distilleries out there that are trying to get their name out there. You think of I can think of a few right here in Clarksville that have started off.
What? Old Glory, Leatherwood.
Leatherwood for sure.
Leatherwood, absolutely, 100%.
At some point, they're gonna be top shelf.
They've got one.
Once
I gotta
they
try.
get it figured out, they're gonna be good.
We got to try
Snake
their,
Eater is
what is
good.
It, their
That's the-
Funklehead.
Oh, the Funklehead.
That's the one we
Yeah.
haven't tried yet.
Yeah.
Their Snake Eater's good. The custom batch they made for
That's
Fifth
the best
Group
one
is
they've
the
ever
best.
made. They should
Yeah.
make that on a regular.
Or at least do a signature batch ever so often of it.
Yeah, every 4 or 5 years,
Yeah,
do a signature batch
of that.
with the fifth group. Because with
Yeah.
it being fifth group, every 5 years would be perfect.
Mhm. And then you release
Not
it right
to,
at our September reunion time.
Not to drop anything on you guys, but
Right.
Leatherwood just listen. Every 5 years, drop something for fifth group. Just saying, it makes sense. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us here at Bourbon Sauce. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. The more you like, subscribe, the better our chances are we can grow the channel. And if you follow us on Instagram, www.instagram.com/bourbon sauce, you can figure out what's coming up on upcoming episodes and
Interact with us.
interact with us.
Provide feedback.
Put in orders for merch. We will be putting more pictures and things up on Instagram, so just go ahead, stay tuned, check it out.
Merchandise pictures for bourbon glasses and coasters should post this week on our Instagram.
And if you don't see them, then that means you're not following us. So you should follow us. And if you can, message us there, give us feedback, interact with us real time. You can interact with us on also Spotify or Apple Podcasts, where you can give us a thumbs up, a rating. Hope you come back. Until next time, enjoy your favorite beverage. Until then, get sauced. Cheers.